All right, a quick quiz recap for the goniometry quiz. Perfect bell curve. It's the classic PTA top-heavy bell curve, which low score 75, high score 100, average score 89. Perfect, 1.79 standard deviation. So good job. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the questions that most people or everybody got right, but I'll talk about the ones that were a little more difficult. So those are all good. Those are all good. The first area where people ran into issues was sort of the terminology that goes with goniometry. And this is from the lecture. So validity, same thing. Validity means the same thing as accuracy, if you want to think of it that way. It's the degree to which the goniometer measures what it's supposed to measure. And most people got that, but that was probably one of the more missed ones. So the consistency of measurement between different examiners is inter-rater reliability. The reliability of the measuring device is not validity, and the standardization of procedures is also not validity. So it's the validity, how valid is the measurement? Does it measure what it's supposed to measure? So that's how you tell if the tool is the tool that you want to use. The Yeah, easy, easy. Most people got, but intra tester or intra rater, it means I measure and then I measure the next day, and how accurate are the measurements repeatedly between the same examiner. So different examiners, that's inter-rater or inter-tester. And the validity is the accuracy. And the accuracy of landmark identification is going to affect validity, but it's not it and it will affect intra and inter-rater reliability. But that's the answer to that question. And interestingly enough, most people got that intra-rater reliability is higher. So it's higher when I measure and then I measure again versus when I measure and then you measure. So, and then the next one was the difference there can be between two different examiners. Plus or minus 5 degrees is what the research shows, and most people got that. Yeah, all these ones. The in plantar flexion, most people got that the movable arm is aligned parallel to the fifth metatarsal. Um it's not going to be aligned with the fifth metatarsal or with the lateral epicondyle. It's parallel to it. So it's not quite right on top of it, but parallel. So everybody did pretty well on the end feels. The Obviously you did. I don't know if it's obvious, but you did well on the normal end feels, which you learned last quarter, and the pathological end feels were a little more confusing, even though most people got them right. I'm not going to go over every one. This was one of the most difficult questions, and I find this particular thing about recording knee measurements completely annoying. And if you say 0-10-135, 10 means that you're lacking that much in extension, and more than half people got that, but it's a confusing way. I don't like the line method like this of recording knee range of motion because it's confusing, and this question highlights the fact that it's confusing. Everybody got that. Everybody got that. Trunk motions, the tape measures the measuring tool of choice because you can, like on Physio U, we saw that measuring lateral flexion, we use the goniometer. So there's some measurements where the goniometer works fine, and other measurements where it's a little more difficult to isolate and the tape measure works better. So the case study, I think the case study was hard, and it was supposed to be. So just really, I'm starting to add in more case studies this quarter because I'm trying to soften you up for the board exam in a couple of years. So take that with a grain of salt, and I'll tell you which ones. So this question is that same silly knee range of motion measurement thing. And and I think that's kind of why most people missed it. But and it was like so close. If a few more people had missed it, I probably would have thrown it out. But we do need to understand that this is how some people document knee range of motion. A lot of times now these days, people are using electronic medical records, and they have a grid that they put things into the grid. That's much clearer, much clearer. I'm pro grid. But you'll still see this sometimes, and so it's good to know. But when we look at her range of motion measurements, her involved knee active range of motion was 10 to 120 degrees, which means she's lacking 10 degrees of full extension and she has 120 degrees of flexion. That makes sense. Passive range of motion is 5 to 130. So she's lacking 5 degrees from full extension. And why can't we just write it like that? Why do we have to do the line method? I think we should just write it like that. But anyway, if you do 5 to 10, 5-0-130, it means you're lacking 5 degrees from full extension and you have 130 degrees of passive range of motion. The second most picked answer was 5-10-130, and you don't normally record the active and passive on the same line. That's what's wrong with this one, is it records the active and passive on the same line. 5 is the lacking 5 degrees of passive extension, and 10 is lacking 5 degrees of 10 degrees of active extension, and they wouldn't be recorded on the same line. So that's what's wrong with this one. And then 10-0-120, that is talking about active range of motion. And the question asks about documenting passive range of motion. And the last one, 0-5-10-130, there are just too many numbers in there. And again, it's combining active and passive range of motion. So if you got that right, then kudos. That's definitely a hard question and very confusing. The second question, the following factors that the prolonged demobilization and current joint inflammation are affecting. There are precautions for goniometry, and most people got that. The last question was pretty hard, and I think this one is hard because it's beyond the scope of what you've already studied, but it's sort of a preview type question of what you're going to be considering. So the primary limitation, both flexion and extension are equally significant because you need full extension and a decent amount of flexion to do most functional activities, particularly walking. But you don't know that because you haven't had gait yet. But if you kind of reasoned it out and figured that out, that is great. And so I don't know. I'm considering anyway, this is a hard question, but good for you if you got it right. And then the extra credit, how do you get better at goniometry? Practice, practice, practice. So of course everybody got that one right. So great job on the quiz. I think everybody's right on board with goniometry, and hopefully moving into manual muscle testing, it'll be the same thing. And we will move on with our lives, and I'll see you all soon, either in office hours or in lab.